Hang on. So you're listening to Radio Shields North East, and today I am chatting with an amazing guest, and with the spring equinox well on its way, this month's theme is all about growth and development. And today I am so delighted to be chatting with Martin Pemberton. Martin was an English footballer, he still is an English footballer, and a central defender who played for many different professional clubs before moving to a non-league side at Farsley Celtic in spring of 2005. Feels like a long time ago now.
Yeah, a long time.
He is now a wellbeing and performance consultant. He's also a director of professional services with Rhomb Associates, and he's the author of the 1 to 11 Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I can't wait to find out more about that. That's amazing. So Martin, a professional footballer for more than a decade and a learning mentor for disadvantaged children for about 6 years. And he's also a mental health advocate and public speaker. You know, there's nothing great in the world has ever been accomplished without passion. And Martin's passion is really about raising awareness about mental well-being. He's also a qualified fitness instructor, a personal trainer, a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, an emotional freedom technique practitioner, and a mental health first aider. Wow! Martin, what a combination of amazing skills. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I think those things as well just come about by chance, I suppose, not always by design. And that's also be relevant with the 1 to 11 when I speak later about how that came about as well. It wasn't really by design. It just came about in a very organic way and through a real life experience.
It's funny, isn't it, how kind of like the universe almost guides you into different places and to meet different people. And there's that saying, there's that expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I think there's a sense of, I think we all have this fear of lack of control. We want to control all these things that happen and around us and things like that. And actually, when you realise that you're not in control of too much of it, except yourself, then you can kind of let go a little bit and then you can kind of free yourself up. That's the way that I've felt, and with my experiences over time, it's just been about focusing on what I can control, what is within my control, and then everything that's outside of it, I kind of have to not focus on it, because we tend to, and a lot of people, we always focus on all the other things that we have absolutely no control over, whether it's circumstances, how people react. And I think that's been one of the biggest light bulb moments for me, has been recognising that.
Having that acceptance. I love that word, acceptance. Yeah. There's a prayer, isn't there? It's the serenity prayer. I know that a lot of people use this on a daily basis to help them, and it's something like, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And looking at the work that you do and kind of doing a little bit of research into who you are and all the things that you do, I really felt that prayer resonated with the work that you do. And what an amazing journey you've had. Really learning and growing and developing. How did it all begin?
Well, I think for me, I mean, when I do often start with my story, it began with me just as an 8-year-old boy who started playing football and just had this real passion for it. It was the thing that I just loved to do. I was always doing it before school, at break time, after school, in the evening, you know, just it. And the more I've thought about it over time, it's just one thing that I was drawn to, that I felt like I wanted to do. So from 8 years old, when, you know, you're thinking not necessarily what you want to do, I decided that I was going to be a professional football player. And in my mind at that time, as an 8-year-old boy, it would be just that simple, because, you know, you make up your mind, obviously with all the pitfalls and things that come on the journey. But I always had this real inner belief and knowing that that's what was going to happen. I was really certain on it. I can't explain how or why, but I knew from being 8 that that was what I was going to do. So again, with practice and dedication, and this is the thing I say to people as well, I think when it's not hard work when you love what you do, because you're just doing it. It's only hard work when you don't really want to want to do it. So when I think of the countless hours of practice playing football and all that training, it was also just playing in the park with my friends and stuff, not realising that that was still part of the practice, right? So for 10 years then you practice and hurdles along the way, and you do have to come through adversity. I had a stress fracture in my back. I think I got that when I was 11, but we didn't identify it for 3 years. Then I had to have a complete year's rest from football or any sport, and that was probably, in that time, probably the toughest moment then was probably around the 6-month mark, where I did shed a few tears at that point. I think I was just more frustrated because I couldn't do PE. I couldn't do anything except swim, and but got through that year. But even in that moment of struggling or having a year where you couldn't play, it never entered my head that I wouldn't still achieve my goal. It never wavered. It was just this unbelievable, unshakable faith that that's what I was going to do.
Like, so it was your divine calling.
You just and everything about playing football just made me feel alive on the pitch. And when I go in and speak to kids sometimes about following your goals and your dreams and things like that, that's one of the things I identify with them, is that it's how this thing that you're doing, how does it make you feel? If you can forget about what's going on in your life, and even time just flows by that quickly, you know that you're in the thing that you're kind of meant to be doing. So eventually, 10 years later, 18, turned professional at Oldham Athletic. But when I look back now, retrospectively, once I achieved that goal, it wasn't how I thought it was going to be. The day that I signed professional contracts, it wasn't how I imagined it to feel, if that makes sense. So my expectation of how I was, and so this is why when I do talks and things, and I talk about living without any expectations, and the example I always give is like when you've planned to have a night out and you plan this party or it's an event and you're really looking forward to it for months, and you go out and then it never hits the level of what you thought. But the nights when you just went down to the pub with your friends locally, and those are the nights when you end up then going into Leeds or wherever you live, and you don't get home till the early hours, and you have the best night of your life because it wasn't planned. So it's this thing about expectation is the mother of all disappointment, and that's what I say to people. When you're disappointed in someone or something, is it the thing or the person, or is it your expectations of them? Did they not act in a way that you expected, therefore you're disappointed? Because if they do what you expect them to do, it's always okay. And so that's what I found in my experience. Anytime that I have expectations of something, then often I'll be disappointed. So try not to have any, and try to see where things will take me, and try to be neutral about everything, so that I'm prepared for if it doesn't go a certain way.
I like to talk with my clients about a blueprint, because quite often in our heads we have a blueprint, don't we? And any architect, any good architect has good blueprints of the buildings that they're going to put together. But sometimes when building that building, things don't quite work out, do they? And although on the plan it looks like it's going to be amazing, the reality is that sewage pipe won't go in there, or that roof's not going to work at that angle. I mean, I'm not an architect, but things quite often have to be tweaked and changed. And I do think it's a good idea to have some kind of objective about where you're going with your future, definitely. But 100%. Having no kind of really strict blueprint or
you need to be flexible.
Yes,
you have to. The plan has to have flexibility. You can't be too rigid, because again, if you're too rigid, what do you do when it doesn't go the way that you want it to or expect it to? And then that's when people struggle. Then, so I became pro. And like I said, I think it just showed me that actually expecting something to be a certain way maybe won't reach the heights that you want. But I think for me, then everything changed in terms of playing football, and I think it became more of a job then to me rather than a love, if that makes sense. So reaching the goal that I have wanted for so long, for 10 years, I desired to get to, and I worked to, and I got to. Once I got there, it kind of didn't materialize into what I wanted it to be. But then also when I speak to people about this, I never set the next goal. So my lifetime ambition to become a footballer, I achieved. But from there, the mistake that I made was not right. Now I've done this, I want to do this. I want to play 100 games. Then once you get to 100 games, right, I want to play this. So that's why I say to people about goal setting, once you achieve your goal, be careful in terms of make sure you've got another one because you can stagnate, and then things maybe won't go then where you want them to go. So that's what I kind of learned from that journey, is that I'd never then set that next target to move towards that next step. And
So
I think that's important as well.
I have a morning meditation routine, and one of the things that I do in the morning is I think about what future Amanda would do.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I had a bit of a late night last night, and was talking to a really good friend of mine, probably for far too long on the phone.
Yeah.
And we were chatting for ages. I was like, I'm really going to have to go to bed. It's really late now. But of course, so when I opened my eyes this morning, I felt a little bit groggy. And I would have loved to have just stopped in bed a bit longer and not prepared myself properly for the day. And what my first thought when I have any of those negative feelings is, what would future Amanda do? Well, future Amanda would get up, she'd have a nice shower, she'd put some good clothes on, she'd make herself feel really good, she'd have a bit of extra self-care because the tiredness is there, and then she'd get really motivated and energised and get on with the day.
Brilliant. No, it's brilliant, because that's
so
what
I do future Amanda chat.
And that's I mean, when I go through the 1 to 11, something similar will come up. So that's, like I spoke to somebody yesterday and was talking about that when you feel like staying in bed, actually the best thing to do is try get yourself up if you can. I mean, we know that's not always possible for people depending on what state you are in, but if you can, just get yourself up and get showered and get dressed, and like you say, get yourself moving into some sort of routine helps. I think Mel Robbins has the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, doesn't she, where over in America she uses that method of counting down like a rocket from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you're up. So that's the method that she uses to do stuff. So after football, then that time comes when you kind of have to retire, and for me it was through injuries. And in my career I probably had quite a few injuries, more back operations. I had a couple of back operations in my time. So while you're doing it, you kind of don't realise the skills or the life experiences that it's giving you to then might be transferable later on in life. One of the other things I always say about when I do talks as well is about when you do play football, the perception is, I think, especially with the amount of money that people can earn now playing professional sports, that people have this outside view that it's this wonderful thing. They've got all this money and they just kick a football around and it must be wonderful for them. But I always give people the flip side when I do my talks of, you've dedicated yourself to something to get there. Once you get there, you've still got to dedicate yourself. You're in competition with people who are in the same club as you to get in the team. So you're competing every day to get in the team. Once you get in the team, you've got to stay in the team. So you're worried about that. Every game could be your last, but you don't go out thinking that, because that's not a good mindset to be in, but it could be. Then once you're playing on the pitch, you're competing against 11 other people who are trying to stop you and beat you. And then you've got people who have paid for the privilege to come in to abuse you. Also, they feel, because they've paid the money, to shout anything they want at you, and there's no retribution. So I would say,
and there's some good football banter goes on, isn't there?
Oh, it's brilliant as well.
And some of it can be really cruel.
It's great, but there's some, you are a target, and so I think when I say, when Eric Cantona jumped over those railings back in, I think it was 1995 down at Selhurst Park, I don't think there was one footballer on the pitch who wouldn't have come out and said, yes, he was right, but they were secretly happy that he'd done something that probably many people have wanted to do. Because when I say to people then, if somebody came into your work and was sat at the side of you critiquing every little thing you did and you still had to perform, how would you feel about exactly. and then I said, and then somebody who's maybe not done the job that you do then gives you a mark out of 10 in the national newspaper for everybody to see. So and I said, so it's quite you've got to be very, very resilient. So taking in that under consideration, I said, as a footballer, sports person, is it all it's cracked up to be? Yes, there's the really high side of it where you're doing a job that you love, but on the flip side, there's a lot of pressure also, and they have to have a high level of resiliency to do the job that they do. So after that, then I then swapped one job where I got abused into another one as a learning mentor with disadvantaged kids. So yeah, I just swapped one area for another, but for me, it was after football, it was like, I want to help people, and I kind of didn't know how I wanted to do that, but this opportunity came up, so I ran with it. And it is a really rewarding job in terms of seeing the progress that you can make with these kids who have got a different upbringing and a different home life, which again, what that's done for me has helped me to not judge people, because in that scenario you might see some of these kids coming in and then be judgmental of the parents. How could they let the kids have a bottle of Coke and some crisps for breakfast? But you've got no idea of what their life is like.
That's
so
right.
And you have to catch yourself being judgmental, because we all are judgmental. It's just about catching yourself and trying to think. You have no idea what they're going through, so you can't judge, and hopefully that people won't judge you as well. So and in the middle of being in that role as well, which I learned so much, but I also kind of had these feelings of imposter syndrome while I was there in that role as a learning mentor, because I come from somewhere where I was really capable and had done that for a long time, to a role where I didn't know, it was new. I didn't know if I was doing it correctly. And I was always waiting for someone to ask me the question that would trip me up. And then in my mind, it was like, everyone's going to know I'm a fraud and that I don't deserve to be here. That's the kind of commentary what was running around in my head, then while dealing with all these other things as well. So and I think there was a bit of a power struggle going on at work as well. And I was kind of the person where both parties would come to talk maybe or criticize the other, but I was very impartial. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And I think then as well, I got married in that time, moved house, and baby had been born, so I had a daughter as well. All these firsts happened like within an 18-month period. So when I look back now, I understand what was now to follow in my story. So I ended up, I think it was July 2013, and I had the man flu, essentially. We're now serious. That is man flu, right?
Terrible. Life-threatening.
Well, this is what if you can beat man flu, you can do anything, right? That's
Absolutely.
what I say. So yeah, it was July. It was boiling as well, but I was just freezing. I was in a fleece and everything. So I got sent home and looked after. And then I was due to come back to work. I can't remember, it was the Wednesday, but the day before I was sat with my daughter at the time. We were just watching something on TV, and I don't know what it was. And I think that one of the protagonists in the power struggle had been off and was due to come back as well. So I think I knew what I was going back into, along with everything else. And at that moment, just watching TV, I just had this sudden wave of emotion just came over me. And then just a tear just started to roll down my face. So I was like, I've never had this with man flu. This is a bit different. And I discreetly removed myself from the living room because I didn't want my daughter to see. Because again, and when I look at this now, as for men, crying, it's not done as a professional athlete in a male-dominated arena.
There's a lot of shame about expressing any kind of emotion, isn't there? Particularly among men.
Yeah, particularly. Well, then I started to think of that about how we speak to boys in terms of all the old sayings when it's like, oh, if you cry, don't cry like a girl. It starts at a really young age with boys that they're not allowed to express any emotion except anger and aggression, because that's all right because the boys and the fighting. But I think what boys learn then is that any emotion they feel that is foreign comes out in anger. So if they're scared, it comes out in
angry.
Anger. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If they're sad, they get angry. Mm-hmm. It's all that's an acceptable, or was, for boys to get angry, and that's why I feel for men now we grow up practicing that. Therefore, we're unable to open up. We're unable to accept the emotions that we feel. We're unable to cry because that's a sign of weakness, and everyone will know. And that's why I believe the suicide rate for men is so high, because we've not been taught how to access and accept our emotions, and that they're all right. And that starts from those things that you hear as a little boy when people will criticize you for crying or being soft or
it's like we're programmed, aren't we, from a young age, or particularly guys are programmed from a very young age to not express emotion, to keep it all hidden, to keep it all bottled up inside, which is like so destructive, because all that emotional pain just festers. And it becomes like a festering wound, doesn't it? And trauma, I work a lot with trauma, and trauma I really believe just gets stuck inside the body, inside the digestive system, things like irritable bowel syndrome, inside chest, with problems with breathing and palpitations, inside the muscles with muscle tightness. But it also has an effect on the unconscious mind, and I really believe that it's almost becomes like our factory settings, that whenever we feel like we have to respond to something, we have this go-to app, if you like, like on a mobile phone, like your factory settings. Whenever something goes wrong, we defer to our factory settings, which I do think you're right. It's either self-destruction or it's anger. Like that anger is either inward or outward at the world, isn't it? It's a really dangerous state of mental well-being to be in.
Absolutely. And then from there, once I removed myself, and again with all these things of thinking about, I don't want my daughters to see me crying and all these other things, I went in and just went into the kitchen, and my wife at the time there, and I just broke down, and I just said, I can't go in tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I had this massive weight on my chest that I just could not, I didn't have any strength left to fight anymore. That's essentially how I felt. So my wife said to me, why don't you go book into the doctors, which I did. But as soon as I booked into the doctors, I was worried and anxious then about what he was going to say or she would say, what the doctor would say. So it was then right, what if they say there's nothing wrong with you? What if the doctor says to me, get yourself back to work, there's nothing wrong? And that was the fear of going back into that scenario. So I had then anxiety and worry about that till the next day, until I went in. But of course, the doctor being professional and caring and understanding and empathetic. He gave me a sick note and advised me to give me a prescription for some tablets. And again, that, I suppose, we've got to look at that maybe as well for people, that's not the first go-to. Maybe back then it wasn't, maybe it's different now, but I think we've got to look at other solutions as well before we're straight on to medication. We have to look at all the things what we talked about earlier about lifestyle and all the other things, the way that thought patterns, and can we look at those first before getting straight onto medication. Some people need it straight away, and for me, if it works for you, absolutely, you use what you can use to help you feel better. I tell
you what else I think as well with medication. I think that for many people it's a long time before they seek help from a doctor. So by the time they get to a doctor, that medication is actually really, really helpful for them. But for a lot of people, we're almost obsessed with being happy now. We have to be happy all the time. We have to feel peaceful and happy and wonderful all the time. And actually, the reality of life is that we do. There are aspects of ourselves that have to die, and that's a painful process. There are bits of our personalities we have to work on. There are bits of like our dark sides that we don't like. There are challenging times in life that are going to feel really tough, and we're gonna, I think the most important thing is that we realise that, life isn't about being happy. Life is about in that kind of balanced state, in that middle ground, in that kind of central road.
I'm just funny you said that, because I just a poem that I put on this morning on Facebook. It talks about this sweet spot of being in the middle, and in terms of what you've just said, in like maybe social media and other things in terms of life, about like you said then about people, they think that you have to be happy all the time.
Everybody's ecstatically happy all the time on Instagram.
Because that's what everybody posts,
it's a beautiful world.
But by shooting for that and believing that that's what you should have, therefore I believe that the kind of mundane and the normal then puts you in a state of feeling really sad, because you're not at that level, when actually if you didn't know about that level and you didn't think that you should be there, the mundane and normal would be happy. And then it makes the trough so much lower for people, because they think and compare and think they should be up high, which even if you were, you wouldn't be able to sustain anyway, and you'd come crashing down, because it's not possible. So that's like you just said, the sweet spot is it's like there's a little corridor in the middle that you're just going to be up and down on like a wave, and you're trying to stay in that little corridor. That's where contentment is. That's where peace is, I think. But either side,
I think that's where satisfaction is as well. When you, like you were saying, when you love what you do, when you love your life, when you're enjoying life, you're in that place of satisfaction. You're in that. You're on that middle ground, aren't you? That balanced, in that place of balance. And when 100%. With balance, you have harmony. And we're meant to experience the highs of life, the Instagram lifestyle. We're also meant to experience the lows as well. That's where we, where it's in our darkest hours where we learn the most about ourselves. And I always like to think of it, I use this analogy a lot, like when you're a seed and you know, before you become a plant, before you become a beautiful blooming flower, you're a seed, and the best place for a seed to grow is in the ground. In the dark brown stuff. I don't know that
that's
I
where
can
it
say
comes.
that rude word on there, but you know what I mean. That's the best place for a seed to grow, and we do, don't we? We put manure, we put fertilizer on the ground to help nurture the plants, and I do think that it's important for us to embrace the dark side, the dark times, as well as
definitely
striving for that. That Instagram lifestyle.
it's not real, is it? It's not real.
It's not real.
And so that's one of the issues for society in general, is that we're shooting for this unattainable thing that we think will bring us happiness, but once we get there, we'll find it doesn't. It's like that expectation thing, thinking that you need that to become happy. And then I ended up going to counselling for a few sessions, which was really helpful. Just being able to speak about something, not necessarily being given any tips or advice as what to do, but just to kind of speak about what had gone on, how I was feeling. But during those times also, there was also depression and anxiety simultaneously. So, I remembered having to get out of the supermarket because I thought the checkout lady was looking at me and was thinking things about me. She knows what I think, what's going on in my head, and just the panic and the overwhelm, and just leaving the trolley and getting out there and having to go lie in bed for a couple of days with my head under the covers and feeling like that. But then, listening to my wife then with the two kids downstairs and feeling terrible because I couldn't get out of bed to go downstairs to help, and I should be doing that, and the cycle just it continues, and then you stay in bed.
Pain, panic, self-torture.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was actually on one day to counselling when things probably took a real turn, in terms of I would get these, I'd see groups of people walking towards me, just going on the lunch as people do, and groups of guys, and in my head I was thinking that they were going to like mug me and steal my phone, and so I'd get myself into this fight or flight state. I needed to go to counselling, so I had to go, which meant I was going to have to fight in my head. So I'd do a quick scan of the group and think, who's the biggest? I'll go for him first, because if I get him, they'll all think I'm a bad man and they'll leave me alone. And you get ready, and then they just walk past and they don't even notice that you're there. And you're like, and then you go, well, why would they even be bothered about me? And you go, oh, you're so silly, you're so stupid, all the negative commentary. Oh, it's ridiculous. And then 2 minutes later, you'd see another group and you'd go through the same process. It'd happen again. They're going to do this. So I spent my trips to counselling also being really anxious of getting there, thinking that things were going to happen. And one day I was crossing the road, I had my earphones in, and a car came round the corner, and I jumped back, and they came round. I think they beat their horn and probably screamed a few obscenities at me. But what happened then was I said to myself, oh, that was really close. I could have got knocked down then. Could have maybe broken my leg, might have broken my pelvis, might have had a concussion, might have ended up in a coma. This is how my brain started going. And then I said, might have even died. But the next line was, but that'll be all right, because all this will be over. That's what I said to myself. And that's when I was like, wow, all this will be over, because I was just tired of feeling like that with the ups and downs and all these other things. And that moment I realized it was even greater than deeper than I had realized as well. And so I mean, I've had help along the way. I mean, there's something I'll touch on a minute with the 1 to 11 stuff. But what happened eventually, I was on an NLP training course, and it was a lady on the course. We were just talking in between sessions. I was talking, and she just asked me a couple of questions. And she asked me, one of the questions she asked me was, do you pay your friends? I said, and I was like, what do you mean, do you pay your friends? Well, the way that you talk, I'm wondering about yourself. I'm wondering why you've got any friends. You must pay them, right? And then I knew exactly what she meant. It was all the things that had come full circle were the problem I had was how I felt about about me and my own self-worth and self-esteem, and that I didn't feel valued, or I didn't think I brought any value, so I didn't think other people should. And I think that all came from the process of playing football for such a long time, and then the lack of capabilities. I talked about the imposter syndrome, moving into a new role, and all the other new things that were happening in my life. I think I identified so much with being a footballer because I've done it for so long. That's what I could do, but I thought you kind of make it who you are, and then you lose that identity, and you lose the dressing room, and you lose all your friends, and you come into a world what's completely different, and it's not the same sense of humour, and you feel like alien to everything, and you can't do the job that you've loved anymore. And so it's like a bereavement. It's like but you don't think of these things when you're finished. It's kind of like the grief and that you never dealt with, and you just try to float along, So it's like a bereavement in many ways, not being able to do that thing anymore that you love doing. So from that point, then, that was one of the real turning points, and I'll be ever grateful to Julie for asking me that question, because it helped me to first then come to the level of acceptance. I had to accept how I was feeling about me internally, which was then reflecting the external world to me. So I started to make some changes, and I'd get better, but then I'd relapse. I'd get better, relapse, get better, relapse. And so in the end, I got fed up with relapsing. And I said, I've had enough of this. I need to figure out what I'm doing when things are going well. Because then I started to think, we very rarely look at life and assess it when it's going well, because we're just happy that it's going well. It's only when things go wrong that we assess it. So I was why don't we look at things when we're going well, which will give us some clues as to what we're doing, so that then we might be able to carry on those things. So that's what I started to do, and I started to analyse and look at, and what came out with these 11 things. And again, I didn't count them up, I just wrote them all down. And when I counted them, there were 11 things. And then that was the link to football with 11 players on a pitch. This is how it happened for me. And then I always remember when we used to play before squad numbers, and you had the numbers 1 to 11 on the shirts, I always remember managers saying before we went out, if we win our battles 1 to 11, we'll win the game. So that came into my head. So it all just happened, like wrote them down, counted them, linked to football. That's saying and so I thought, right, if we can do well in these areas in life, we're gonna be okay. And then I started to think about football also in terms of how it mirrors life, about the ebbs and flows of the game. But things can go wrong at any time in the game through a refereeing decision. You might get a man sent off or an injury, and all of a sudden you're up against it. Yeah, you're scrambling to keep the ball out of the net, and we've had those moments in games many times where you're throwing yourself in front of the ball to block it, and the other team's pouring under pressure, and the crowd's on your back. And what we do in football matches is we just try to sustain that period and keep them out for like a 10-minute block, and we weather the storm. And then eventually, once we've weathered the storm, it passes. They've had this intense pressure, but because we've held out, they can't keep up that pressure. And so we start to get back into the game, and we start to get a bit of control, and we start to move forward again as a unit. And I thought, isn't that just what happens in life? When we get knocked on the back foot, we have to weather this storm for a while. But then once we do that, we're able to start to put things together and get a few passes together in a match. And then we get more confidence, and we silence the crowd that are shouting at you. So I thought those were the similarities between football and life. So then I started to put these 11 pieces into a team formation, and then you can put them into any formation in any order you want, except number 1, which I thought, what was the process of me changing, which was acceptance and responsibility. I had to accept how I was feeling, who I was at that time, all the things that were going on, but I also realised and had to take some responsibility for the part that I'd played getting to there, because it hadn't just happened overnight. I'd done a series of things over time, behaviours, ways, habits that had led me down that path to hit my rock bottom. So, and in football, I say, this is the one principle you must have first, because without acceptance, you cannot change anything. If you're in denial, you can never change anything. That level of acceptance must come for yourself and for others. And I say that's the goalkeeper in your team setup, because if you haven't got a very good goalkeeper, you're going to concede a lot
You
of
have
goals.
a problem.
Exactly. So that's what I say to people. Number one, acceptance and responsibility, personal responsibility.
Yeah, and I think part of that acceptance is, you know, that you need to have that self-knowledge, don't you?
Absolutely.
You need to have that self-knowledge and almost sort of really assess where you are. Look at the quality of your goalie as well, if you like.
Yeah,
You know, assess where you are and almost take an inventory of like where you are in your life. Take stock of where you are in your life. What's good? What's working well? What's not good? What's not working well? How am I feeling about that? Have I got acceptance around that? What was my bit in that? Did I do something wrong? And I really think that that's an absolute foundation for any kind of change.
100%. And from there, because sometimes people say, you know, but if you accept those things and then you're going to blame yourself. And I say, it's not to blame yourself, this responsibility. It's about understanding that you've created something or played your part in it. And so that's really powerful for me and empowering that if I've done that, then all I've got to do is the reverse and I can create this other thing. So rather than see it as a negative and kick yourself, you just accept where you're at right now and you understand the parts you've played, but understand that's really good because now you're aware, you can change that if you want and you can create something new. So that's why I say that's the first. And without that, you're probably not going to be able to start to change. And then I looked at what else did I need? And I thought communication with myself, what I was saying to myself on a regular basis, but also what I was telling other people, because which then leads to number 3, which is support, because without good communication, you're not going to get the support that's required. And the reason I knew this is because I wasn't telling people at the time how dark my thoughts were and where I was at in terms of having suicidal thoughts. And so they were trying to pitch their level of support to me on what they perceived or how they thought I was just a bit down or a bit sad. And the advice they were giving me, I was rejecting because I thought that is the worst possible thing that I can do. So I started blaming them for not understanding, not listening, but what I failed to realise is they didn't have all the information. Because when I gave them the information of where I was at, they instantly changed the way that they could support me and then how they helped me. But that was down to me giving them the information about where I was at.
So we've got acceptance and responsibility as like the absolute foundation of any kind of transformation, of any kind of growth or development. But then you bring in at the kind of second level support and communication. And do you know, we live in a world that we're quite isolated, aren't we? Quite a lot of the time, and we're without support. And we find, I think for a lot of people, when they're in those really dark moments, reaching out and just saying, "Hey, I'm having a bad day. Can I have a chat?" Having that ability to communicate is really tough. When you're at the lowest ebb, you quite often feel like you don't want to bother people.
You isolate yourself.
You do. It's one of those
100%.
things. We kind of crawl into a little hole in the ground, don't we? And we just go, I just don't want to phone anyone. I don't want to bother anyone. That's what I hear a lot from people. I felt terrible and I didn't want to bother anyone. And actually, the reality is bothering people is exactly what you should be doing. Because people feel better about themselves too when you communicate with them how you're feeling. It's amazing.
Well, they know what's going on.
Start sharing. You start communicating when you get that support on board. Start to find loads of things in common with other people, and then that's healing in itself, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and if you can communicate how you're feeling, often that gives other people the permission they feel to then tell you how they're feeling as well. And so then you go, wow, I didn't know you were feeling like that as well. Yeah, I did. And then, like you said, you get that support then, and then from there. So that was 2 and 3, and then I thought, what else? And then I looked at like values and stuff, and I thought, things were quite bad for me, like I didn't really have a value system, or I didn't have a way of being. And I know you mentioned it this earlier on when you said, what would future Amanda do when she don't want to get out of bed? And it's the same kind of thing. I started to say, what would the best version of me do? How would he act in this situation? So that's what came in. But with that then comes the courage to try to be that better version of yourself, because I started to look at different things like a lot of people live in shame and guilt and fear and anger and desire. And there's something called the consciousness scale. It's by a guy called, I think it's David Hawkins. Really great. He's got loads of books and work on this about how these emotions actually affect us in terms of strength in body. And I think you talked about that in terms of looking after yourself and how negative emotions can weaken you. Well, it actually calibrates these tests where you can do muscle strength tests on feeling a certain way, thinking about a negative experience, and it actually weakens your muscles visibly, but then feelings of love and joy actually strengthen you. So then I started to look at where was I operating? And I think he talks about the change takes place at around this level of 200, which is the level of courage he talks about. And I started to think, like, it requires courage. If you think of anything that's ever been a challenging situation for you in your life, you've required courage on some level to change it. Always. It's like, always courage.
I love it. I teach a meditation technique called the lion's roar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a lot of it's like facial expression, and people get right into it. They always feel a bit of a wobby to begin with. I talk about like really connecting with your inner lion, if it's and getting a face like really get and then just feel that courage, connect with that courage and roar.
And that is
the weird session, but it feels so empowering and powerful.
When you realise that courage actually is the fastest way to kind of start to change something. It might be just courage to admit how you feel about yourself, which happened for me. Courage to admit how you feel about somebody else, but maybe courage then to be forgiving and not take the easier road of hate and anger, right? So this is what I thought. So courage was one of these things. And so if you know that, then you can try to ask yourself, what is it that you're scared of? Because it even takes courage to admit that.
It does. It really does. Sometimes it takes courage just to say, I don't know enough, or I want to find out more, or I can't do this, I need help.
The courage to get out of bed in the morning if you're really in a bad spot. It takes courage to do it.
It does lots.
So I thought, right, and I looked at all these levels and I thought, right, so courage, and it's trying to be that best version. What would the future Amanda do? What would, the best Martin do? He'd do this. And then, so that was another thing. I thought, when I was struggling, I didn't have any of that. I kind of had an inability to do it. And then I looked at the other thing, which was gratitude.
The superpower of positive emotions.
Because again, when I was struggling, there was zero gratitude. It was always about how bad things were, how terrible people were, how they'd done that, how everything was wrong in the world. And there was no gratitude for all the things that I did have. And so I started to think, when I'm feeling good, it's as simple, and I say to people when I speak, is about just saying the word thank you. It's such a powerful, simple tool. But if you say thank you in your head for everything, even if it's something you maybe didn't ask for, but you say thank you for the opportunity to learn from this and to try to grow, then it changes the way you feel about it.
Yeah, it does. And it's actually impossible. I mean, give it a go, but it's impossible to have a positive and a negative thought in your head at the same time.
No.
You can either be miserable or you can be feeling more positive. And if you're in that dark space, gratitude immediately flips it to a more positive place. And I believe that living with gratitude, living with an attitude of gratitude, really firmly puts you in that middle ground, in that corridor that you were talking about. You kind of start looking around and going, oh my goodness, I've got a cup of tea sitting right there, which means that I had money to buy it. I was able to get a cup. I went to the shop. I earned the money to be able to get the tea and the milk and everything.
Definitely.
And some really simple things can just can have so much more meaning and value as well.
Well, and another thing on the thank you thing, I just started as well, been looking into some things about in terms of how we treat children. So I'm from an era very much of children seen and not heard. But we're starting to look at this work in terms of treating children as our equals, in terms of being human beings, not the capabilities, not what they can do, not what we can do, but just as a human being. If you treat a kid as an equal, but a lot of adults struggle with that concept straight away. But then I was thinking about like all the reward charts and well done for doing this and well done for doing that. But actually, what if you said thank you instead?
Oh, I
How
love
would
it.
the child feel? Because actually telling them well done is based on your level of recognition. They don't learn to recognize themselves. Because
That
I
is
always
so
say as well,
true.
if I say in the talks, if you were washing up and an adult said to you, "Oh, well done for washing up," what would you do? And they all said, "Get the dishcloth on a tray at the end." But we'd say that to a kid, "Oh, well done for doing it," and it's patronising.
Yeah, it
So
is.
even they can't verbalise it, but I'm sure we feel it. So what happens if we said, "Oh, thanks for doing washing up"? They feel good. Do you know? So like even when I go into
Yeah.
schools now and I'm looking at how do we approach these kids, reward charts and that are brilliant, but we're rewarding them on a level of what we think is good. We're not teaching them to self-recognize. So what if we started thanking them and looking at them as equals, as individuals, as humans, and not having this vertical relationship where I'm the adult and I'm in charge of you?
What an
I think
amazing idea. I love it.
and then we're going to create a group of people who grow up self-recognizing, capable. Because what we've got now is the snowflake generations, they're called, but we've created them because we've done everything for them. We've never given them the chance to become resilient or to fail or to do stuff because we wanted to protect them. So the intentions were good, but we've taken away the capabilities or the belief in the capabilities. Therefore, and then we criticize them for not being able to do stuff now.
And I think they're
It's like,
very external, aren't they? They live in this kind of external world and they don't
yeah,
really understand how to read their internal world. So they don't
no,
understand their own feelings. They
yeah,
don't understand how to manage their own
yeah,
feelings. They don't know how to
yeah,
communicate with the world either from that
no,
internal place.
no, absolutely. So yeah, so then I've got number 1, yeah, 2, 3, and then so you've got the keeper and the back four, and then the next bit was, and I didn't have any goals after football. I didn't, again, like I talked earlier, I didn't set the next goal. I didn't have any. We talked about it earlier about just having little goals that you kind of try to follow, but you know that maybe it's not going to go the way you want. But also with those goals, you need a little bit of structure, which you talked about earlier as well. That doing this, we've got to do this. You get up in the morning, you'll do this, this, and this. But with an understanding of the plan might not go as you want, but at least you've got a way of kind of doing things that has to be flexible. So with goals became then the structure, and I started to look at my own wellness goals of every day. What was I doing? So I put those into place, and then a bit of direction in terms of what I wanted to do in life. And then once you've got your goals and you've got your plan of how you want to do something, I think then it was what I understood was that there was then it was this discipline and consistency that go together. They interchange, because without discipline, you can't be consistent, and without consistency, you can't be disciplined. You can be ill-disciplined and inconsistent, but therefore that'll determine how well your plan works out for you. But to be disciplined and consistent, I understood that underneath that, underpinning it, was commitment.
Yes.
There was a commitment to myself now that I had to answer these questions of what was my goal, why is that a priority for me, what would be the consequences of not achieving this thing, and then why would that bother me? And that gives me my answer as to whether I'm committed to doing the things that I want to do. Because if you're not committed, you're probably not going to achieve it. So you might as well go find something that you are committed to. And then the last thing on the 1 to 11 that came up was time. And what I thought about this was, if I'm lucky enough to live to a really long age, when I get to the end, hopefully I'll be in a bed as an old man. And I thought to myself, what will I want when my time's coming to an end? And it won't be more money. It won't be more stuff. I'll just be wishing for more time to spend with those people that mean the
Who you
most to
love.
me. And so that's when I realised, I went, right, that is actually the primary commodity, is time. What am I doing with my time? And so then I started to look at, and I say to people, if you just get an A4 piece of paper, turn it into landscape view, and list how you use your time throughout the week, and then look at how much time you're investing, spending.
Oh, I'm just doing that this week.
Yeah,
I've literally got a big whiteboard in my other room right now, and I'm logging every single hour of the week and looking at what I'm doing so that I can see where I'm perhaps wasting time.
There we go. That's what I was finishing with. Investing, spending, and wasting. Because once you see that, you'll see how much time you waste, and you can kind of see why you're getting maybe the results that you're getting. And then you also can look
Like
to
it.
see where can I put some time in for me. You know, if you might be a busy parent who don't get much time, there'll be somewhere that there's something you can do to switch stuff up. So I started to look at that and think about that way you can be more productive, and then that investment in yourself and that spending time, which is time what you've chosen to spend with those people and doing those things that you love doing, and then trying to eradicate as much of the wasting time as possible. Not saying don't ever waste time, but be aware of how much you
Sometimes it's nice to waste time.
Of course it is, and it's part exactly. You need to do it. And so, but yeah, and I put down on your plan how much you sleep. You know, what time you get up, what do you do here, and just it gives you just an overall view of where you're at. And then I started to think of time as this concept anyway about this. You know, people talk about with the mindfulness and living in the now and all these things about how much time what can you control, and does the past exist? Does the future exist? Probably. It depends. People have got varying degrees of what they believe. But even me and my daughter did an exercise the other day, and it just, again, came about really organically. We were driving somewhere in the car, and I said to her, oh, that lamppost is like 5 seconds in the future for us that we're driving towards. But then another car drove past us going the other way. And then we just both went, but it's 5 seconds in the past for those people. And it just, it blew our minds. Like, you know, we're all going in our own direction. And,
yes,
you know, it's like, it's such a weird thing, but all you ever do have is just right now. And it's that focus on right now. And it's about how much do you identify with your past, that it could have made you who you are, but can you draw from it for the positive stuff that's happened, and maybe not use it as a reason for why you're where you are now or where you want to go. Because I think there's a danger in terms of time, is that we can justify things, can't we, in our own head as to why things are, and that happens.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And it's easy. We all can do it, but also thinking the stresses that we have in life are all future or past related. They're never right now, are they? It's about wondering what someone's going to say to you.
We're either worried about the future, or we're stressing out about what happened in the past that we can't, about the things that we can't change because they've already happened.
Yeah. And again, then it comes back to that, and that takes us full circle into then your results. And again, control. What can you actually control? Which comes down to, you can control yourself and what you think and what you do and what you say.
And how you react or respond. That's kind of it.
Because outside of that, you can't control it. But we focus so much on that's what causes a lot of our issues, really. But that's
sorry, go on.
That's how the 1 to 11 came about, and that was essentially it. But then I started to look and I thought, this helped me with my recovery, but it's also not just for mental health. I believe if you look at just life in general, it can be a great tool for people to put in place to use in many areas of their life. So that's what
I was going to ask you, because in my head I've got this whole football team going on now, and I've got my goalie is a big chubby guy in my head. I'm quite visual. So I've got this big chubby guy in goal. He's there. He's got loads of acceptance and responsibility. He's chatting to people. He's got the support there. He's got the communication. He's got his values and his structure and his objectives, his goals. He's living with gratitude. And then he's put in place some structures. And all he has to do is he has to be disciplined about that. He has to have the passion and the drive and the commitment. And he has to just keep doing it. He just has to keep doing it, that consistency.
Yeah.
And then that is what brings about that moment of now that is more positive, that has that is flowing and and easier to work with, no matter where you are and what's going on in your life, so that time becomes a really beautiful place. So I was totally imagining this team. And it just kind of made me wonder whether you could use this 1 to 11 kind of structure that you've got to maybe, I mean, obviously I can see how it's going to really work well for like mental well-being, for things like addictions, for like business. I'm thinking about my business as I'm doing this. But just as a kind of assessment, as well as a kind of check-in to see, am I doing all of these things? I mean, we could use this as a little kind of self-reflective, self-assessment tool.
It's a toolkit. It's an assessment toolkit.
It really feels like it.
And you can, because it's an assessment toolkit, it gives you the opportunity to assess where you start, and then it gives you the ability to constantly assess, because you're always reflecting back to where am I at, how am I feeling, that's happened, how do I deal with that? And the thing in terms of all the pieces on the board, they will change and will go into different places at different times, because the football on the pitch is like time, is like the situation where it's on the pitch, depending on how your team is structured. And so you have to, again, everything's in a constant state of flux. So that's why I feel it's really fluid as well. And that's why I say to people, the order that I've put them in doesn't have to be your order. Except for the keeper, you move them around with the level of importance that is good for you right now. And that's why I believe it's just this thing that can be so universal for people to kind of think of, and like you said, use as a toolkit as well, that's ongoing assessment tool that they can always come back to. And when things do go wrong, because like we said, the ebbs and flows of life, they do, you can come back and look at your 1 to 11 and you'll identify somewhere on your list something that you've stopped doing, or you're not doing anymore, or you maybe need to focus on to try to re-implement, because it's just a fact of life, because it's that consistency, that discipline, which is so difficult for us all to do and achieve. That's what it gives you, but it gives you that blueprint and kind of safety net to go back to and assess and go, right, okay, I've stopped doing that actually. Do you know what? I have started staying up later again. You know, I've been going to bed at 11 instead of 10, or, you know, I'm not drinking as much water as I wasn't. But you know what? I am maybe having a couple more beers than I normally have on a night. I wonder why that is. Do you know? And then it gives you that chance to start to go back and go, right, okay, what am I doing? What was I doing when I was doing well? Because you've logged it all and you know, right, can I get back to that? And how quickly can I do that? So again, because it just come through this organic process, I didn't make it up, I didn't design it, I didn't sit down and think, oh, I'll do this for well-being and all this stuff. It just happened. And those are often the best things, because they just come from a real life experience. And so everything that's happened, being a footballer and not playing anymore, the mental health stuff, I'm thankful for it, because without that happening to me, this 1 to 11 wouldn't have been born. Therefore, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to share it with people to try to help. So something that was, you know, construed as negative for me actually was a good thing, and it was necessary. So
I love your 1 to 11. I'm going to go put another sheet on the wall now and draw my football team on there, and have a little look at where maybe I need to, like, you know, switch out a player, get one of them subs off the bench and get them on the pitch.
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. People can add to it. They could have 16 things. I don't know. It's just like I say to people, this is not the gospel by me. Go use it. Switch it around, change it, add to it, whatever you want, because it has to be yours, and it has to be yours, else it won't work for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you know?
And I'm not so precious that I won't. I'm not so precious that I'd be offended if someone went, actually, well, I don't like that, I'm going to put this in. I'd be like, yeah, do it, because that's going to work for you. You know.
Yeah. So earlier we were talking a little bit about resiliency as well, and how important it is, particularly for our young people, to learn to be resilient. I know when I was a teacher for a few years, and I taught out in Spain, and I remember working in a nursery, and they'd given this kid a penknife to whittle wood. I don't know if you know what I mean by whittling wood. I don't know if that's a Yorkshire expression, but you kind of like scrape the wood off with the knife and make like, I don't know, bows and arrows, or break twigs to go on the fire and stuff. And I was like, why are you giving this small child a knife? This is crazy and dangerous. And I remember the parents said to me, oh, my child needs to learn. My child needs to learn that sometimes when you learn things, it's not easy. You have to be careful. And if you're not careful, you hurt yourself. And he said, if I don't teach my child that sometimes in life there's pain, when they get older, they're not going to know how to manage pain, are they? And I was like, oh, yeah. We do tend to wrap our kids up in cotton wool a lot, don't we? And
we don't give them the chance to find their capabilities and to try stuff. And often it's because we're in a rush, or we don't have the time. We don't give them the time to learn. We'll do it for them because it's quicker, you know. So now, like with my daughters, I'm trying to let them do as much as they can do themselves, so that they get the recognition and feel that for themselves for doing stuff. And then I'll always say thank you, not well done. I always say thank you instead now, instead of well
Yes,
done. So I give that
I love
gratitude
that.
to them. Yeah, it's just a little thing that you can change, but I believe it'll be transformative for many people in terms of relationship with kids. Because
It's
they're
going to
constantly
build them
told
up
what to
and,
do.
and
Well,
give
they're
them
always
that
told what
resilience.
to do. You just get told what to do from day one, and you're always judged on whether someone else thinks you've done it well. You're not taught to trust. And how did you do? How do you think you did? What would you change next time when it didn't go so well for you then? Yeah.
And is that
And it's asking them.
is that a part of the resilience and performance training that you do as well?
Yeah, it's just because, again, once you identify that maybe that's how you've been thinking, and we can start to look at kids in a different way and kind of empower them to make some choices, things will, I believe, can change over time, because we're going to create these younger people who are coming through who are all capable and confident and can deal with the little knocks in life, and then these little things, they'll breeze past them because they know they're capable, because they've experienced it before and they've got the confidence, and it's their own self-worth that they believe in, not like
so
what they've got now.
important.
They'll put a picture on Instagram, and we all do it as adults, don't we? It's about how many likes you get already, and that's the culture we're creating. So there's no idea about what you feel about it. It's always based on, that's a good picture because 50 people liked it. Well, what if you'd spent 2 hours doing your best piece of work and you know it's good? You're waiting to see if other people say it's good for you to know that it's good. And it's like, it's just, it's just, I don't know. And so I think if we don't change at that level, then all the mental health epidemic that we've got now is going to get worse, I believe, it'll be necessary for us to change, to learn, to help everybody in the future. But I think we've got to go to the younger people and start there and teaching them a different way of thinking about themselves and us thinking about them, for this change to take place. But these things take time, don't they? That's how. Yeah.
And I really believe that we are, as a nation, going through a massive time of growth, a massive time of change, but a massive time of development as well. And it's important to get messages like this out to people, that there are ways of living in a more positively, in a healthier, happier way. And it's nothing like that fake Instagram world. It's about love, and it's about family, and it's about communication, and it's about that. It's about feeling satisfied with who you are, isn't it, on a daily basis? And if someone's listening to this show this evening and they're in a dark place, maybe very similar to something that you experienced, perhaps they're even having sort of suicidal thoughts and feelings, what advice would you have for them?
I would say to recognize that you are loved as a person, and that you would be missed. You might not know it or think it, but you not being here, if that was the way that they were thinking, will have an impact on somebody. And there'll be a hole if you're not here anymore. And I think it's that love for yourself and understanding that people do love you. Sometimes you can't even accept that. So it's understanding you have got value. You might not think you have, but you really, really do. The fact that you're here says that. And you've got something to give to. You've got something to give to people. You've just got to figure out what that is.
If you're still breathing, you have value. If you're still breathing,
100%.
you have the potential to give and receive love.
Yeah. And the second thing I'd say is just be brave and go speak to somebody. Just admit where you're at, because it'll do you the world of good. And although it's the scariest thing to do, to admit, even for yourself or to others, you'll then get the help that you
find the
require.
courage.
And something Paul Merson said, I saw in an interview on Sky recently.
Oh, I used to love him.
Yeah. He said the illness wants to isolate you. That's where it wants you.
It wants you alone, and it wants you dead.
Because then it can get you then. And that was a massive thing for me as well, that I learned not so long ago, that when he said that, he said, it wants to isolate you. So even though you might not always feel like it, it's that courage to reach out, to just call, to spend a little bit of time with people. And you don't need to apologise for how you are, but again, around the right people, and identify which people help you to feel better and which don't. And those that don't, because you do know and you do feel it, maybe just keep an arm's length if you're not at your best, and get around those people that that give you a really good feeling, you know.
So reach out to others and
Absolutely.
ask for help. Find the courage, and sometimes that's the hardest thing, isn't it? And tell yourself, today I'm going to do the hardest thing that I can do, and I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call someone. I'm going to walk out the door and I'm going to go to a community drop-in centre and I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to go see my GP. That might be a good place to start. I'm going to see my doctor and I'm going to ask for help. But
be
find
kind
that
to yourself.
courage. Yeah, be kind to yourself. I love that.
And others.
I'm all about kindfulness.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so you do lots of work. You go into schools and you talk to kids. You do lots of public speaking as well. But you also offer one-to-one coaching. So if I wanted to work with you, how would I go about doing that?
You can contact me. I have a website, just 1to11it.co.uk, or I'm on social media. I've got a Facebook page, which is just 1to11it, and on Facebook as Martin Pemberton. So contact details are there. Send me a message. I coach depending face to face or whatever people want, over the phone or over video, and pretty much with a 1to11, I think it covers, like I said, it can cover all kinds of things, and it can be resilience, it can be well-being, it can be for mental health, it can be for all kinds of things. And it's just, I just want to help people. And I've been through something, experienced something, and found something that's worked for me. And I want to try and pay that forward and just help people to feel better. And then the impact from that is that they feel better and they'll go have that impact on someone else. You know?
I can completely see how your 1to11 program is massively empowering and effective. I think it's just an absolute work of genius. So thank you, Martin, for bringing that to the world, and thank you so much. Extra thank you for coming on the show today and sharing your story and sharing your program and telling us about what you do. And you know, if you are listening to this show tonight and you are in that dark place, there is a solution. You know, this moment will pass, and you can reach out and get help. And if you want to reach out to Martin himself, he's there for you, and we will put all of his details, of course, on our Radio Shield's Facebook page. So just massive thank you, Martin.
No, thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful. No, I've loved it.
It's been amazing to chat to you. All right, take care. Bye-bye.